My name is Joey Montoya. I'm a communication specialist at Los Alamos National Laboratory. I grew up in Espanola, New Mexico. Moved around a bit. Didn't think I would come back to the area, but I did. Um, so I'm here now. So Espanola is, and it was. I don't live there anymore, but it was kind of a rough town. Um, I was kind of embarrassed to tell people where I was from. So I would say a nearby town near Espanola, but I wouldn't say Espanola directly, just because it has a drug problem. Um, and it's looked down on. People are, a lot of the times, people are afraid to drive through Espanola. I don't think it's as bad as people made it seem to be. There's a lot of really amazing people there. And it took some growing up to realize that, just because I was sort of resentful for the whole experience growing up and going to the high school there. Yeah. So my interests have always been, I was drawing when I was a kid. I would when Windows 95, I would always spend a lot of time on like Paint, MS Paint. That's where I started on like digital art. Um, Trying to like clip out certain faces or put them in different bodies, things like that. And when it came to the school, the classes that I could choose, I made sure to always take those art classes or computer skill classes that allowed me to develop those. So I always had that interest and passion in that digital art world, and I made sure to focus on those classes. And they actually um, they just help stir that passion, which I think is important in pursuing and looking for things that you want to do in life, is to get yourself involved in those types of activities um, to ignite that fire. I'm a communication specialist at a laboratory. So Los Alamos National Laboratory, there's a lot of complex science that goes on. And how do you bring that science down to a understandable level to non-scientists, to the general public? So I'm a videographer, photographer. Um, I do audio editing as well, and so I bring science to a general audience for TV or YouTube. I use a lot of motion graphics to make things understandable, because a lot of things in science, you can't visualize it, you can't record it. Some things are so small, and it's sort of an abstract idea that you need to create visuals to get that idea across. So that's what I do. I create short videos for social media and for general audience on understanding the science that goes on in Los Alamos. So a typical day for me would be, I'm creating videos or some sort of audio for to bring science to a general audience. So I might be talking to a scientist, trying to understand what they do, so I can interview them on video, and then create a story where I use motion graphics, where I'm editing in Adobe After Effects, for example, or definitely Adobe Premiere. I do that every day, and just to try to figure out how to visualize science and make it understandable to a non-scientist. Um, like, we do podcasts as well, so I could be scheduling podcasts with scientists and anybody else that I'm coordinating with to make that story happen. Photography, I might be driving out on location to a laboratory with some equipment, setting up lights, and trying to photograph, um, you know, whether it's a small little device, and try to make it look as interesting as possible. Because sometimes you don't see much; it's just a machine, right? So you have to be creative and try to problem solve and figure out how to make how to make it look interesting. Most of my work is done on desktop or laptop. I have my video cameras and my recording devices, but I'm most of the time, you have a video shoot, it might take a couple hours, but you spend a few days editing on the computer. So yeah, most of my time is spent on the computer. So some soft skills that I think are important in my current position, there's just a few things. So the first is that I always try to practice and perfect. You'll never perfect, but your craft. So practicing your craft is like so critical to growing. Um, so I'm always challenging myself, trying to get myself involved in projects or some sort of product that I haven't created before. So everything I produce has a new element that I've learned that's new. So that's how in this field you have to continue to grow and to learn um, new skills because and design is always changing. There's always something new to learn, so it's very important in this field. Um, when you're in my case interviewing people and learning how to connect with people and make them feel comfortable in front of the camera is also really important, and it's a skill you have to learn, and that's just through practice. And also, it falls back into just practicing your craft, whichever that may be, is very important. Generally speaking, some things I try to always remember is in the workplace, never talk bad about people if it's just to talk bad about them. When I hear people that are always talking about other people, I try to avoid that, get out of the conversation. I think it's very important to have a good workplace environment. Um, and also, another thing that I always try to practice and I think is important in the workplace is to follow through with your word and have integrity. So when you say you're going to do something, do it. And if something comes up, just communicate. Don't let things slide by. Yeah, follow through with your word is very important. So, in the next 5 years, I currently love my job. It was my dream job. I get to make. I have a lot of creative input and freedom. I get to tell stories that are really geeky, and I love science, and I might be making a video on a scientist who's figuring out how to deflect an asteroid, or some of the scientists that work on the Mars rovers, or some scientists who are working on the ability to predict when earthquakes will happen. So all these different types of science and brilliant minds I get to talk to on a daily basis and try to figure out the work that they do and how to make it presentable to non-scientists. So I love it, and in the next 5 years, I do want to develop more writing skills. So I want to be, instead of just creating video and visual products, I want to write more. So my workspace is kind of like a newsroom. A lot of my coworkers, they're journalists. So I'm the video person. And I want to get more involved and I want to learn how to write more like a journalist so I can create news releases and columns and coordinate more with the media. Um, so in the next 5 years, that is my goal. Something I find really important in pursuing a career is, especially when you're in high school. When I was in high school, I was to myself a lot, so I spent a lot of time in my own mind, you know, and I had to. I knew what my passion was, and that's art and video and graphic design. So it's important to find what that passion is and pursue it relentlessly, in any way that you can, even when if it's not in school, if you can figure out a way to do it at home or with friends. Um, and one of the questions I used to ask myself is like, if I had every skill in the world, if I had any skill in the world, what one career would I want? And that I really wanted to do what I do now. I wanted to create videos in an engaging, interesting topic, and in my case, it's science. And um, it's an important question. You can really find out what career you should pursue by asking yourself that question to make yourself happy.